Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of Mr. Mackenzie's Distance Learning, The Spanish Civil War, Foreign Intervention Part 2, End of the War. Let's begin now. We're going to start today looking at the International Brigade, which was really, in a sense, international solidarity. The Civil War had raged on for 4 months by the time the International Brigade arrived, and Madrid, the capital of Spain, was under siege. Now, not all Republicans were so happy about these volunteers. In Catalonia, some anarchists feared their revolution was being taken away from them by these communists. So you almost have a civil war within a civil war. In Madrid, anyone was happy for some relief of the enemy. Most volunteers were communists. Those who weren't felt isolated. But for many Spaniards, the Soviet Union's support seemed like a salvation. All the arms were paid for by the Soviet Union. But in compensation, Spanish gold reserves had been sent to the Soviet Union. Germany also increases its aid. It sent instructors to train nationalist officers. Now, the nationalists by this time were holding about 60% of Spain. At the same time, Mussolini is becoming more impatient. And without even consulting Franco, he sends large numbers of volunteers to Spain. Foreign aid from both sides had poured into Spain at faster rates, but not enough to clinch the war. It only prolonged it. Now we'll look at the Basque region. You can see the Basque region on the map there in the north in red. The western part of the Basque country was still Republican. They had been separated from the rest of the Republicans since the early part of the war. The Basque region was heavy in industry and mineral wealth. Here, conservatives were fighting side by side with anarchists and socialists. The Basque gave the lie to Franco's claim that his campaign was a Christian crusade. Nationalists put a shipping blockade and mined the harbor around the Basque region. Some British merchant ships went through anyways. On April 26, 1937, 43 aircrafts, mainly German, took part in wave after wave of attack on the small Basque town of Guernica. Now, Guernica was also a military target, fairly big civilian center, but it was also a military target. There was a small arms factory there and a bridge. In 3 hours, 100,000 pounds of incendiary, high explosive, and shrapnel bombs were dropped on the town, with little remaining standing, except for the arms factory and the Germans' main target, the bridge, which was meant to be destroyed so no Republican army could make its way to Bilbao, one of the major cities in the Basque region. Now, for those of you who've been paying attention, Guernica is very significant. And if you were paying attention to the title page of these lectures on the Spanish Civil War, you would have noticed that I was using Pablo Picasso's famous work and mural Guernica. This was commissioned and Picasso painted it in 1937. And it really shows through his kind of Cubist style the destruction and horror that the people, the civilians of Guernica, suffered. The closer you look at this painting, the more you can see. The building on fire with the person screaming on the right. The injured person in the foreground, kind of dragging a crippled leg. We see someone on the ground, trampled, probably dead. On the left side, we see a woman in agony, um, mourning probably the death of her child that she's holding there. So this was obviously to show the destruction and horror that the people of Guernica were suffering, the civilians, the innocents, the women and children that suffered at the hands of the German Luftwaffe here. Now, Picasso painted this in 1937, but it was brought to Spain in 1981, 5 years after Franco's death. Picasso never wanted this painting of Guernica to be in Spain while Spain was under a fascist dictator rule. So little side note there for some art history today in IB history. And now back to the end of the war. Now, with Bilbao about to fall and be bombed by the nationalists, Western democracies finally felt free to help. The children of Republican Spain were catalogued, given medical inspections, and transported to England, France, Belgium, the USA, and the Soviet Union. Franco soon broke through into Bilbao and seized the region's industries and mines. Soon, Franco was exporting iron ore, his clients including Germany and Britain. Both countries would use the captured resources for their own rearmament program. Non-intervention by the real or fake, whether it was Germany or Britain, didn't interfere with business or prevent the world war that was about to follow. FDR, President of the United States, was sympathetic to the loyalist Republicans, but was held back politically. He was more interested in domestic issues. Even the Catholic Church believed this civil war was a holy war against communist atheism. By October of 1937, nationalists had captured the Basque country, but remained stuck outside major population centers of Barcelona and Madrid. Those were the last two main cities in Spain to be captured. By the summer of 1938, the international brigades were demoralized and exhausted. While Germany increases its weapons shipments, Russia, Soviet Union's support decreases. For political reasons, Stalin started pulling back from Spain. In May of 1938, the nationalist forces fought their way through to the coast, thus cutting the Republican forces in half. On the map, you can see kind of the two areas that the Republican Spain controlled in red. We have Catalonia with Barcelona on the right, and in the middle we have Madrid. Those are the last two areas controlled by Republican Spain, but now they have been cut off by the nationalists. After the Munich crisis, or the Munich Conference of 1938, Russia stopped supplying arms and advisors to the loyalist Republicans, and the Spanish government sent the international brigades home. Now, why do this? What's the benefit of this? Obviously, Spanish Republicans want another foreign influence to get involved, that being the League of Nations. So they're hoping by sending the international brigades home, the League of Nations can now intervene in an effort to order Franco's German and Italian troops home. And for all intents and purposes, the International Brigade left heroically. People in Republican Spain were sad to see them go because they helped them in this war effort. So a great exodus began afterwards, and people fled to the frontier. On March 28, 1939, Franco entered Madrid, and the rest of the country surrendered in the following days. The Civil War was over, and Franco had won. So now let's talk about the results of the Spanish Civil War. FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, admits American policy had been a grave mistake. The Spanish Civil War was a grim tragedy on the battlefield, but also for diplomacy for France, Britain, and the United States. The world showed Hitler and Mussolini that it was soft, and the dangerous policy of appeasement was really born with the Spanish Civil War. And as a result, Hitler and Mussolini knew that Britain and France were not ready for war and would do anything to avoid it. Democracy in Spain was dead, and Franco's dictatorship would last for 35 years. After this Spanish Civil War in 1939, Spain is war-torn and will not be able to participate willingly in World War II. So although, they do kind of, they are neutral through most of the war. Hitler and Mussolini, who are looking for an alliance and an ally in Spain and help during World War II, don't really get it with Spain, but they at least get a country that is fascist and ideologically aligned with them and not with the Western powers. Thank you very much. Goodbye.